Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us on a Sunday. We appreciate you being here.
Hey, everyone.
If you're able, feel free to unmute yourself and say hi, or just say hi in the chat. Thank you, Stephanie. Hey,
It's
buddy.
another Stephanie. Hi, T Mark.
Are you able to unmute?
Hi,
There
hi
you
everyone.
go.
There we go. I was it wasn't connecting to my ear pods, so
We wanted to hear your
hi everyone.
voice.
Hey, Mark.
Hi.
Hi, Jessica, Stephanie.
Well, again, thanks for joining us today. My name is LaTanya. I'm the Dean of Student Affairs at Menlo College, and I'm so excited to be joined today by two of my great friends and colleagues, and we're just excited to have this conversation. We do know that National First Gen Day is coming up on November 8th, and we'll talk more about that later. But as people are starting to organize and think about events that celebrate first generation students, we wanted to focus on a particular population that often gets overlooked with regard to how they support students, and that is campus service workers. So we're referring to our custodians, facilities workers, maintenance, security, housekeeping, dining hall staff, et cetera, et cetera. So we're thankful that you decided to spend some time with us. I'm going to pass this now to Stephanie to introduce herself.
Always muted. Hey, everyone. I'm Stephanie Santos, Youngblood. And like LT said, I have been working with her and Georgina a lot over the last year on these types of topics. And I also spent about 6 years working at UCLA, specifically with campus service staff, running a program where they got to receive tutoring, English tutoring from UCLA students. And so over that time, I just got to see, endless examples of how influential they are on the students, and how often, even though the students were there to tutor them, they got so much mentorship and support and just validation from having that person who understood their culture, who reminded them of home and could be kind of like a surrogate family member to them, and just mentor them in really culturally sustaining ways. And so that's kind of my background and how I got interested in this. And yeah, I'm just excited to share some of our ideas with you all. I'll pass to Gina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Georgina Guzman, and I'm a professor at Cal State Channel Islands, and I teach English and Chicano studies. And I'm also the faculty director for community engagement just recently. So I'm excited to take on that role. And in fact, I think the conversations that we'll be having today will be helpful to me as I try to think about ways that we can further incorporate campus service workers as part of that community engagement, right? Because we always tend to think about how can we serve and have service learning in the community, but we never think about how we can have those reciprocal relationships with people on our very campus, right? They become very invisible. So yeah, that's precisely why these conversations are so important. And doing work on equity and inclusion, I think we talk about it, right? But we never think about how we incorporate campus service workers into that inclusion and equity on our campus. So yeah, I have lots to share, but I'm excited to see you all. And yeah, let's see, who should we? T-Mark, I think you should go next.
Again, good afternoon, everyone. T Mark Montoya, he, him, his. Fun fact, because I've been sharing it, the T is for Tommy, just in case anyone has ever been wondering. It's not Tomas, it's not Tom, it's not Thomas, it's Tommy. I won't answer to Tommy, not because I don't like it, just because it's not the name I've ever gone by. That's my dad's name. Anyways, it's and my dad, who was a custodian, and sort of the reason why I contributed to the book, which will also, I think, will be talked about later as well. It's good to see you all. I'm at Northern Arizona University as an associate professor of ethnic studies and also the director of the ethnic studies program here on beautiful indigenous lands in Northern Arizona. And these indigenous lands where Black Lives Matter and queer lives exist. Again, it's great to see you all this afternoon, or wherever you might be. I'm assuming most folks are afternoon.
Thanks, T Mark. Are we still going around? Let's pass to Daisy, another special guest. Daisy, are you able to unmute yourself and say hello?
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. So just general intros. Sorry, I missed the beginning. My name is Daisy Alonso. I'm a double Bruin. I'm very excited to be here and so excited to be part of the program. So I love being part of these. Like, I feel like I miss out on a lot on just very collaborative experiences, and just this is an important conversation. So I'm happy to be here.
So this is a national context, Daisy. So Daisy's referring to UCLA. Everybody don't know the Bruins, Daisy.
Sorry.
It's great to have you. Both Daisy and T Mark contributed to our upcoming anthology. Yay, it's coming out next month, but we'll only spend a little bit of time talking about later. The important thing is this conversation. Jessica, thank you for joining us today. Are you able to say hello?
Hi. Can y'all hear me? Oh, okay. So I'm a graduate student at NC State, and yeah, that's me.
Thank you for joining us all the way from North Carolina. Awesome. And Stephanie is here. Stephanie, are you able to say hi?
Hi, sorry, I'm like, I just walked my dog, so I didn't know we were gonna be on camera, but I'm Stephanie. I'm a success coach at UC San Diego. So I'm in San Diego. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation and learn what I can do on my campus, especially, like I think of custodial staff or just other staff and all that they do for us and our students. So when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to hear. So thank you all.
Thank you. And thank you for being here and all that you do, Stephanie. Vianney is joining us from, you're not in San Jose. Are you in San Jose today? Okay. Are you able to say hello? I know you're.
Can you hear me? I'm in a coffee shop. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Vianney Popete. I'm a grad student at Santa Clara University. I'm also an alumna of the TRIM Student Support Services. So I'm a first gen. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Vianney. And then joining us from Texas today is Kelly O'Neill.
How's everyone doing? Kelly O'Neill, Texas A&M University, Director of the Student Success Center in our College of Education and Human Development. Really interested in the conversation. At a previous institution, the custodial staff was actually part of the institution. Now it's an outside vendor. So I'm hoping I can get a little insight in how to make that work. Thank you.
Great point, Kelly. And then as we start to transition, and Steph, will you be able to show the slide with the icebreaker question? Okay, but before that though, because Kelly's bringing up a really crucial point, along with, I don't know if you all are following the media at all, seeing, I believe it was Michigan State, that's been asking their faculty and staff to volunteer to work in the dining hall because of labor shortages. And Stephanie, Georgina, and I are in a regular group chat. We don't even know what to do with this information or how to feel about it. There's so many different parts to it. But before we start to share some of our ideas, we just want to get a sense from you all in terms of your either personal or professional relationships with campus service workers. So we're going to share the screen just for a moment. And the question is, and for whoever wants to share, not mandatory at all, but can you tell us a bit about your prior experience with campus service workers? And additionally, how, if they did, how they may have supported you as an undergraduate student, graduate or professional school student, or as a professional. I'm happy to share first. I think like many of you, I was a first generation college student, and my family, I was much more aware of domestic labor and domestic work based on the work that my family members did. So for me, when I went off to college, it was more comfortable for me to connect with the campus service workers. They just seemed much more relatable, seemed like family already. And there was one person in particular, the custodian in my building, his name was Mr. Stanley. I just felt like he was like an uncle to me, and I didn't speak to advisors. I rarely went to office hours, but I would hang out with Mr. Stanley quite a bit. And when I decided to transfer from that institution, he was the person that I told, and he was the person that I left a note for. I didn't meet with any resident director, no advisor, talked to very few faculty, but he was kind of my go-to person. So he wasn't the only one, but he definitely was the starting point for me. And I just continue, even at this point now, as the Dean of Student Affairs, always feel very connected to our campus service workers. It's just like home for me. What, anyone else feel comfortable sharing?
And I just want to add, like, if anyone doesn't want to share out loud with the mic, you can also put in the chat. Maybe that's more comfortable for some of y'all.
I think the phrase you use, just like home, it's right. It feels right. You know that those are those people, you can speak to them and you can feel comfortable speaking to them. And one of the ways that they help me is just making me feel comfortable around them and always encouraging me to continue to do what I needed to do, whether that was as a student or today as a professional. I believe that they understand, especially for minoritized groups, some of the things that we are challenged with while we were on the job. So being around them is really a safe haven. It feels like home for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to your story. I think that's one of the things that we discovered, right? That we had very similar story, as you said, as minoritized groups. I think, for me, this question started like to writing about these issues when I was writing like a memoir, creative writing piece, and I was analyzing like the traumas from my freshman year, living in the dorms. And I realized that one of the main reasons that I stayed in college and stayed living in the dorms was precisely because of the workers there, right? Like there was a señora that would come to clean our room or clean our bathroom, because it was like one of those like fancy dorms. We had our own bathroom, and she would come, and I would look forward to her coming every week, because it was the only time that I would actually use my voice, right? Like in the classroom, I was completely quiet. Like I didn't feel comfortable speaking up, because I was like, as an English major, one of the few Latinas in those classes, right? But so I didn't have a voice, but I was able to use my voice when I would speak to the señora, the lady that would come. And she just became kind of like that parent figure. because I was too ashamed to talk to my parents about how I was feeling. And I was afraid that if I told them that I wasn't doing well, that they were going to make me come back home. And so she was the one, like my confidant, the person that I would talk to about how I felt like I didn't belong, right? And I think that's the main thing, right? Campus service workers, they are instrumental in helping us feel like we belong. So yeah, so that's why I love hearing everyone's stories, because they're like the hidden stories that we never talk about, but their workers are so instrumental in our success, right? They're like the hidden heroes in all of this.
Yeah, there's definitely this comfort that I felt. So my role now is my first job out of grad school, and I was in my office for a few months before COVID hit, but my office is siloed, so I'm not like with my team, I'm by myself. And navigating like what facilities is, how do I request this, how do I get into like certain places that I don't have access to, and the people that came in to clean my office were always so like, Mija, come ask me whatever you need, like I'll do it, I'll get it for you, like I'll help you. Whereas like I was meeting a lot of or I was getting a lot of like friction from like the provost office or res life office, who were like, no, 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 no. And everyone else was like, whatever you need, like, don't even bother going to them, like, come ask me. So there was like this comfort, even like the language, right? This Mija is very familial. So that adds this like, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I'll just come ask you because you remind me of my tia or something. So that's how I've been able to interact with them in my role now.
For hearing Stephanie. I feel the same way. I work at a Mission College, a community college in Santa Clara. And really, I mean, I stay late pretty much every day. So just that comfort level that they bring, and that I'm not alone. And especially just that connection, just like familia. And even in addition to, they run the institution. They know what's up. So they can provide you that insight as well.
Stephanie, I just wanted to chime in and say, I think what's also overlooked is the role that the campus service workers play in helping new employees transition. I mean, we didn't even, our book that we're going to talk about, I'm not sure how much Steph and Georgina, we didn't really get too much into that part. A little bit, maybe more with faculty, not necessarily with professional staff, other than your story, Stephanie.
Yeah, so Stephanie, the other Stephanie, it's so weird. I'm not used to having another Stephanie in the mix. So it's cool. We're always good people, but I keep getting confused about who we're talking to. But so my essay in this anthology, I actually reflected on some of the things that you shared, and just what it was like to kind of feel like you're almost like you're in a new country. Like there's a new language that people speak, and it's like the way to do things that makes sense to you, that's not how it's done here. Especially because at UCLA, there's people that have worked there from the day they graduated from UCLA, and they don't know anything else. And so it's like so much a part of them, and you come in, you feel like an outsider, you feel like an alien on a new planet in a lot of ways. And I saw a lot of parallels with the workers that I worked with who had literally come to a new country, right? And had gone through like kind of a version of what I was going through, but just, I mean, obviously so much more intense and traumatic in a lot of ways. But because of that, I was able to talk to them about those things. And we could joke about them. And I'd be like, what is this form? And, they would be like, oh, yeah, I remember when I first came here, I had to fill out all these forms. And we could kind of bond over some of those similarities where, you're kind of adjusting to a new place and you feel like there's something wrong with you because you don't know these things inherently. Like I wasn't born knowing how to make a room reservation, at some random building on campus, but it feels like everyone else was, right? And so that's kind of a little bit of what I talked about in my essay, and just what what a rock the campus staff were for me in just keeping me going. and almost like being like a spiritual center for me on campus, because their energy extends beyond the times that you just have that interaction with them. It's there when they're not there. And that's something that can keep you going when you do feel like isolated or left out of the group, or you just feel stupid, like, why don't I know this? And then you kind of remember, like, well, Miss Rosaline wouldn't let me call myself stupid. And it kind of like brings you back to reality and out of your anxiety mode. That was kind of my experience.
As people are thinking, I just wanted to welcome a few folks who joined. Julie is here from North Central College, and Susie, hey Susie, Susie Puente, one of our contributors to the anthology, is also here. Maybe we can stop sharing and see if either one of them want to say hello, and then Georgina has more to say. Susie, do you want to say hi?
I don't know what to say other than I went to school at UCLA and I was a part of Project Spell.
Good to see you.
Yeah, Susie's story is also really very similar to mine, actually, right? In terms of feeling disconnected and alienated on campus and how service workers helped us. So she has a fascinating story. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about a little bit or introduce you to the theoretical framework that we've been using, right, to discuss some of the ways in which campus service workers support first generation college students. And we really found that the Freirean, right, framework worked. So Paulo Freire, he was a Brazilian educator on the 1970s, and it was a radical pedagogue who really was changing the way that we think about education, right? Very radical. Because even today, right, in 2021, we still have this kind of banking model of education where it's a top-down power dynamic, right? You go to the university as a student and the professor is supposed to, you're an empty vessel and the professor is gonna somehow enlighten you and fill you up with knowledge. But it's a very passive and top-down kind of dynamic, right? So he was talking about, instead having a horizontal relationship, so subverting that banking model, that vertical relationship, right? That top-down relationship between teacher and student, and getting rid of those kind of social hierarchies that are inherent in the university or in any educational institution, really. So, that's one of the things that we found with the relationship between students and campus service workers. It was those interpersonal connections, those horizontal relationships where there was, the two people had an equal standing. And when they were able to participate in dialogue, they were able to develop trust, humility, and an egalitarian form of communication, right? Learning from one another and having a reciprocal relationship, not this top-down type of relationship where a student would only see a worker as someone that provides a service, but they're like below them. So, right, we don't believe in that hierarchical relationship that distinguishes between workers and students. So yeah, through dialogue, right, Freire said that you can have an egalitarian form of communication that leads to a liberatory education, right? So and that's what all of the contributors to our book discovered, that in their relationship to service workers, they were able to liberate themselves, to decolonize themselves, and become vessels for social change, right? Because when you're able to see workers as equal to you and that you are also invested in their struggle and it becomes part of your struggle, then you want to change the institution and be an advocate to help support workers. So yeah, so that was the lens, right, that we were using to examine those relationships. And I hope it becomes useful, right, in this conversation to think about how we can cultivate those kinds of horizontal relationships and decolonize ourselves so that we don't replicate those power structures that we get taught, right, in the university to like seek social mobility and become a boss and have power over others. Right. I think as educators and as professionals, we want to not become that way and also teach our students not to become that way, right? To work on behalf of others. So yeah, so that's kind of like, you know, the framework that we've been using to critically frame these conversations about the importance of campus service workers in students' lives and professional lives and faculty members' lives, everyone, right? Everyone at the institution. So yeah, I know if you want to chime in or I don't know if what your takeaway was from that, right? Like how can we invest in these horizontal relationships with workers? Yeah, just like
I'll just add really quickly to what Georgina said, because when you use this type of model, you fundamentally operate differently within that space. And that means that what the chancellor or the president of the university says holds as much, if not less, value than your service workers, who are the most diverse workforce on most campuses and who are also an invisible workforce. And they're not just invisible, they're made invisible. And so what happens when you consider what the custodian or, you know, what the plumber says with as much power, force, legitimacy behind it as what the president, what a faculty member says? Because they might not have a degree, but they have lived experiences. They've crossed borders often. They've lived through civil rights movements. They've lived it. And so what does a university look like when you take that approach? And that's kind of where we were starting when we started working on this anthology, is like, what is these horizontal relationships? What does it actually look like in practice in this one context, right? So I guess to kind of extend Gina's question, if anyone wants to share an experience like that, where, you know, maybe you had a horizontal relationship like that, where you got a better piece of advice from the campus custodian than from the advisors like LT talks about, or just anything related.
I don't have like a piece of advice, but I come from a rural hardworking family. And so in the area that I'm from, I already feel invisible compared to like the white middle class people like in the town that I'm from. So going to school at UCLA and meeting the campus service workers, that I would see that students didn't even acknowledge their presence. It made me like develop this working class solidarity with them and feel like they understood what I was going through, even if we were living like complete different realities, just given that they were urban and I was rural.
Absolutely, right? Those moments of consciousness, when you see as a student how the workers are treated by other students that see them as invisible, you do get that sense of indignant anger, right? Because you're like, hey, those workers are like my parents. And, you know, if you're disrespecting workers like that, then that means you disrespect my background, like my family members and where I come from. So yeah, I absolutely agree, Susie. Like I had a similar experience, like you're right. I would see the way that they were treated, and that made me not want to identify with those students. I didn't want to have the values that they had. I wanted to identify instead with the workers, and I developed that social consciousness and desire for solidarity, right? To help to align myself politically with the workers, not with those students that were invested in social mobility and the type of students that, you know, they have their like study groups and they're like, they ignore us, and they're so I didn't want to have anything to do with those. But yeah, I think those moments though in our history, right, become moments that we can then theorize our politics and our commitments in the university and in the world. And I think also workers, right? Why do we trust workers? Why do we open up to them? I think because they're seen as not having authority. They're not threatening, right? It's hard to go to a professor's office and during office hours and like open up to them because of that power differential, right? You don't want to go talk to a professor. Like they have an office. Anyone, like LT says, right? Anyone with an office is already you are hesitant and afraid to go see them. But workers on campus, you're more likely to open up and not have a defensive wall with them, right? Be able to share. So, that's why they're such important institutional agents, like in the university, because they, like students open up to workers and they don't have these defensive walls around them. Yes, the approachability, absolutely. So how can we harness, right, like the potential that these workers have, like they're important institutional agents. So how can we incorporate them within the university? So that's the subject of our talk today.
I'm just going to jump in really quick as well. So recently, NAU, I guess the Board of Regents hired a new president for Northern Arizona University, and he's Latino. He's from Puerto Rico, and he's been really present, really active, and what's interesting is that I've had a few opportunities to sort of speak with him very briefly, but a better opportunity just a couple of weeks ago with folks in what we call the IMQ, which is the Inclusion and Multicultural LGBTQ Center. And I had said to him, like, that there were times in the past, and I spoke to this in the chapter that I wrote as well, where I've been confused for custodial staff. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm a son of a custodian. Like, there's nothing wrong with that by any means. But I also said to him, this is the first time now that I've been confused for the president of the university. And I'm like, and that's a really big deal. And then I said to him, and I hope he caught my joke, was that, so I've been, confused now for the most important person on campus and the president of the university. But that sort of idea, again, that these notions of visibility do matter. And I'm thinking back to what Kelly said was happening at A&M, and it's probably happening at other universities as well, even here at NAU, is that, when I started at NAU 21 years ago as a PhD student, there was like a custodial staff, for example, in a building. Nowadays, they're not sort of outsourced by a different company, but they're just sort of a few folks who will take care of a building more randomly than it being a one person who's there and you can talk to and have those conversations with as well. So not only are these folks who were already invisible continue to be invisible, but now sometimes they're even more invisible as well, because they don't have a space in the building. They're not as present as they used to be. I'm assuming they're coming in later at night or super early in the morning and so on. And it changes that dynamic of the conversations I was able to have, because, again, they're not as present in the past. And I'm just curious if that's, happening elsewhere. And it sounds like it is. And even with what's happening with the food service, I don't remember where you said that was, Michigan, maybe. And those sorts of issues as well, where we used to have the one person or the few people that were swiping the cards or being in the particular part of the building or the room and so on. And nowadays it's so outsourced and it's more random than it used to be. So on the one hand, you can meet more people, maybe on the other hand, it's not that same person that it used to be over and over again. So it makes for a very, I think, interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, definitely, right. The way that we kind of took for granted, well, at least I took for granted when I lived in the dorms and I was in the dining halls, it was always the same lady, yeah, that swiped your card, something as simple as that. And you got to know her. And sometimes if I didn't have any more meals, you know, she like left, like she would let me in. Or if I brought my family on the weekends, like she would let them in. And so you have developed those close relationships with those workers. But yeah, that's a really good point. Right now, those jobs are not as stable, and they're bringing in people that are in a way are seen as even more interchangeable or expendable.
Yeah, they're mostly contract workers, and that like helps them avoid, you know, union stuff that they don't want to deal with. And I think Martha, who's one of the contributors to the anthology, talked a little bit about her learner having to train students to replace her, and a lot of full-time positions being sourced to student workers where they don't really, you know, have to pay as much. They don't have to pay insurance and all these other benefits. And she was like, I essentially have to train a student, an 18-year-old, to replace me. And I've been here for 20 something years. And like that alone is humiliating. You know, I still have dignity. It doesn't matter if you look down at my job. You know, I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of what I've built in this country where I wasn't born. And, you know, it's just such a strange journey to see some of these people achieve things, you know, like this woman in particular. She went and got her citizenship, and we were there with her. We got to celebrate at Denny's. We took her to Denny's after her, you know, her ceremony, and she was just so proud of herself for learning enough English, for studying the test. And she really felt like, you know, I achieved this. And she was active in her union and was such a role model for others, you know, that wanted to get involved in the union. And at the same time, she goes to work and none of that matters because she's expendable, right? And so that's happening a lot. I would guess that's what's happening at Michigan, that they outsourced, or not outsourced, but converted a lot of these jobs to part-time student jobs. And now they don't have enough students to fill them. So it's a very, in my opinion, a very short-sighted way to do things. On like in a financial level and operational level, as well as in a community level, because you're missing a whole group of people now that you used to connect with daily. And it's often people in these lowest paid, lowest wage jobs that you see every single day and that give you that community.
Say if we could affirm and validate what Jessica put about her story. Jessica says, we talk a lot about this in one of my classes. That's part of why it is my favorite class. I've never had another class have these conversations ever. I didn't have a story to share earlier because I've had so many negative experiences with faculty and staff. When we're sorry you had that experience, Jessica. So I just stopped trying to connect with people. I barely even go on campus and stay away whenever possible. Whenever I have to be on campus, I just stay to myself. So I haven't met campus service workers. I'll just say very quickly, Jessica, unfortunately, I think your experience is a common one, not an uncommon one. It's particularly your first gen. We know about being first gen, it stays with us. It's not, you just go to college and magically everything goes away, first gen forever, like they say at LMU. And again, we certainly indict the institutional harm that's basically been inflicted upon you, but also the hope is that there is a community of support out there. And the reason why we're having this conversation is because campus service workers aren't recognized for how they aid in the retention, not just of students, undergrad and grad, but also staff and faculty.
Yeah, I agree with LT. I'm sorry, Jessica. Yeah, institutional harm has happened pride to all of us, right? And that's part of the reason that we're having these conversations today, because for a lot of us, yeah, campus service workers helped appease and help heal some of that institutional harm. Yeah, I'm sorry that you haven't met many workers. I know it's now with COVID too, right? Like when I go to campus, the campus is like very quiet. There's hardly anyone around. A lot of classes are online, and so yeah, it's becoming harder, I think, to have those connections and relationships on campus during the pandemic, obviously, right? So, but hopefully, in the future, things will be a little better.
This is Julie Carballo from North Central.
Hey, Julie.
Hi there. I'm cleaning my house while I join this conversation, so I'm not sharing my camera. But Jessica, your comment is really one of the things that drew me to this conversation. Is I'm just really trying to think of where and how I can provide opportunities for students to share their experiences anonymously or with their name. And I've just had conversations on my campus about that because, we're not always aware of what students' experiences are. And we have reporting tools, but they're for more blatant types of reporting things versus just, sharing experiences. And I've been very troubled by how we do subcontract out a lot of our service work. So then they don't get the tuition benefits. Like the person that cleans in my building I've worked with her for 15 years, has a son who's a sophomore in high school now, and she's worked for us for 15 years, but will not get the tuition benefit. And so I just try to bring up when I can, but I wrestle with how we have this diversity, equity, inclusion task force that's trying to implement these great things, but that this doesn't seem to be a part of it. And so I was curious to see what is, how other institutions reconcile that with, and we do such amazing work with trying to provide opportunities for first gen students and supports and things like that. But, and I'm very interested in getting our service workers more involved with our students. But so looking for ideas, and thanks for facilitating this conversation.
Thank you. And actually, that's a great setup. I know this is why you all are here. So we're going to actually share our screen and walk you through some ideas that we have, but really it's about the collective. And so after we share what we have, we would love to hear from you some ideas that maybe you had before coming in or that have been generated since we began. So again, we actually used National First Gen Celebration Day on November 8th as the opportunity to have this conversation. We could have it in a number of different contexts, but we know that many campuses are gearing up to celebrate their students. And we just want to make sure that we are thinking about a student's entire context and who is in their support system. And so first step is to acknowledge our campus service workers. You can go to the next slide, Steph. And so here, I think I just put this photo here is just as a reminder that there are a number of ways in which students may be interacting with campus service workers. So I would say step number one is to just be thoughtful of where that engagement is occurring. Here's a photo from Loyola Marymount University, where there's a program where students actually work alongside campus service workers, and so you see them doing recycling here. And you've heard of those type of positions, right? Students do this to help pay off their tuition. It's called dorm crew at Harvard University, for example. But we just want to recognize that there are a number of different spaces and ways in which students have an engagement. It could be high level engagement like this, or it could be a little bit more surface, just in terms of like you're getting food in the dining hall. It's all meaningful though. Next. So number one, and I don't know that there's a particular order to this, but step one, easy, low hanging fruit that one could do is simply create spaces where students are actually demonstrating their appreciation, whether it's through handwritten notes or cards, or if they're in the residence hall, they may even have one of those passive boards. This is like my res life experience coming out now, but where they can actually show their appreciation. I've been really thoughtful about community colleges or other institutions that are non-residential. We tend to focus a lot on residence halls, but even a note like this posted in visible spaces where folks can see them could be an easy way to acknowledge. But just this is such a great note here. Dear housekeeping, thank you for your warm smiles. I look forward to passing you in the morning on my way out to class because you always greet me with joy. Kelly, this reminds me of something you had said earlier about the campus service workers creating a sense of belonging, right? Something so small. You make me feel at home despite living on a floor where no one else looks like me, right? I love you. It's awesome. So many folks I know are planning all kinds of like mixers and things like this. And oftentimes when we say, oh, we're inviting staff, there's a particular staff that are invited and there's particular staff that are overlooked. So make sure those invitations are extended to campus service workers. I will say more about schedules, but I think at least a gesture, an acknowledgement that this is part of that these workers are part of their support team would really go a long way. So in other words, when you're hosting your major event, please extend invitations to campus service workers. Along those same lines, be really thoughtful and intentional about your mentoring programs as well. This isn't particular to National First Gen Day specifically, but here's the fact of the matter. Many of these folks are mentoring anyway. We're just not acknowledging them, compensating them, and validating them. So why not create some opportunities? We don't want to hijack it at the same time because we also know how it can be when an institution gets involved, kind of mess everything up. But some folks may be in a space where campus service workers are actively involved in a mentoring program and again, acknowledged for the work that they're doing. Yes, we love this. Shout out to University of Virginia who actually dedicated, I mean, they had like the high glossy media campaign where they explicitly had highlighted, I forget her name right now. I didn't go to UVA, but I know there's a really popular person on their campus. They actually featured her and had her tell her story in the background. So it wasn't, again, just top down like Georgina mentioned. Be sure to include the voices and the stories and the backgrounds of service workers in media campaigns, the university sponsored media campaigns. But most importantly, we want to think about intentional programming. And again, I love when Georgina sets the context and talks about not just the one directional approaches, but what kind of events can occur where there's some egalitarianism, like a paint and sip event, a book swap. It isn't just we're giving information to campus service workers, we're sort of sharing the experience. And I think, oh, Steph, this is you?
Yeah, this is me. So I'm gonna share a few more ideas. One, it definitely relates to planning intentional programming, but I just wanted to be a little more specific about service learning opportunities. So this is a program that I used to run that Susie actually participated in as well. It's called Project Spell, and sadly they defunded my position there at the beginning of the pandemic. And so the student workers are, I mean, not student workers, student leaders are trying to keep it going without any institutional support, advising, or funding. And so it's been a little bit of a struggle, but kind of at its peak, you saw, you know, like I mentioned earlier on, I'm not sure how many of you were here, but the students would volunteer and they would work with these service workers. a lot of them are English as a second language learners, and whatever level they're at, whether they, just know hello and goodbye, or whether they're almost fluent, but really want to get academic English or study for their citizenship and kind of everything in between, they would work together. And during the time I was at UCLA, I actually helped a group of students at UT Austin start a similar program at their school. And there are opportunities for this, but there are also opportunities for students to do service learning or volunteering with the staff. Reading is Fundamental is the kind of like department sponsored community service activity that UCLA's Housing and Hospitality Services Department runs. And pretty much the staff there, whether they're food service worker, who work in an office, whatever their position is, they're able to get a certain number of hours, I think 4 or 8 of comp time, or kind of like professional development time. So they're still on the clock to go and read to kids at schools. And so this is something that could really easily be paired with first gen programming. And kind of like LT mentioned, there are opportunities for those formal mentorships. And there are the totally informal ones where, you're just running into each other. But I think this is a great example of kind of a mix of both. You're intentionally pairing them, but you're also letting the relationships form organically. And so something like this that doesn't require much of any like specific type of skill, interest, or background, like anyone can read to kids. And it allows them to just kind of like get together, spend that day together, going to the school, reading and bonding with the kids. And so that's an opportunity to kind of provide a starting point or provide a space where that relationship can form without, like LT mentioned, the institution getting too involved. I also wanted to talk about modeling interactions and fostering other opportunities to connect. So I don't know if y'all remember the famous like Obama fist bump moment with this custodian, but I think a lot of times people aren't sure how to interact with the service workers. I know one of the contributors to the anthology talked about that, being an international student and just not being sure, like, do I talk to them? Is it okay to talk to them? Am I bothering them? Do they want to talk to me? Like, her point of view was like, why would they want to talk to me? Like, I'm no one, I'm just interrupting their work. And so I think the best thing that y'all can do as staff is to model those interactions, to say hello to the service workers when you're on campus, to take the time to stop, shake their hand, fist bump, whatever you do to greet them, because you're setting an example for others to do that, and that it's okay, and that you're not like breaking the caste rules. But I think there's also so many opportunities for those completely informal connections. And this may have more to do with, what department these staff belong to. If you are in a position where you're able to advocate for them being part of student affairs or student life, I would strongly recommend that because they are part of student life. But even if, like at UCLA, they're part of housing and hospitality or facilities management or environmental services, they kind of have their own little siloed departments. I think these staff throughout those units need to be trained to allow those interactions. The times that you're just at work talking to someone and your boss walks by and you kind of feel that pressure to like get right back to work. And I think we need to train these managers and kind of foster that culture at the university. And a lot of times it doesn't happen from the top down, it happens from the bottom up, of encouraging, of rewarding, in some way of recognizing, hey, T-Mark, I'm really glad that I saw you talking to those students. I'm glad you took the time to do that. And those informal opportunities often create the best types of mentorship that you can find. And finally, encouraging worker-student alliances. Obviously, not everyone here is in a position to do this. I know I walked a fine line sometimes at UCLA, between like these workers that I loved and supported so much and the people that were actually funding my job and our program. But with that being said, there are also a lot of positions that can support this. even if it's informally, even if it's advising students. But there are orgs at other universities, like at Brown, they have a student labor alliance, and there are a lot of solidarity movements between student workers and these staff. And I think, as a lot of you know, sometimes when universities hear it from students, it has the most impact because they want to show that they're listening to the students. And so I'm not saying it's an overnight thing, but sometimes it can be more effective if the staff are striking and their student labor alliance is out there with them, showing up and saying, like, I forget who mentioned it, but hey, you like diversity, equity, inclusion? Cool, me too. Like, listen to these people, because we care about what they get. We care about their livelihoods, and we don't want them contracted out. We want them to be here. And so for a few final kind of recommendations, obviously you want to value the experiences and knowledge of the staff. We kind of talked a little bit, Gina and LT and I, in our conversations about like the magical custodian trope, where it just seems like anytime you're watching a movie and a character is down and out, like just some custodian, some elderly custodian kind of wanders by and just comes out of nowhere and gives some like magical life advice and then just disappears and is never seen again. But I mean, I think actually just remembering, instead of that, remembering, you know, how much they've been through, that, you know, like we mentioned earlier, it's a horizontal relationship. We all have life experiences to share, wisdom to share, and kind of keeping those experiences, knowledge on the same level as anyone else's. LT talked about this, but working with their schedules is probably the number one thing as far as accessibility. I don't know what the schedules are like at other universities, but I know at UCLA it was kind of a 6 to 2:30, 3 to 11, and a 5:30 to 2 a.m. were the typical shifts. But there were also staff that were on, I mean, there were places that were staffed 24 hours. And if you're gonna have a picnic at 12 p.m., like that's fine. I'm not telling you to not have that, but I am saying you're leaving out everybody that comes in, you know, for a swing shift or a night shift. And so don't think just because you want to have an event in the evening that the staff isn't there. They're there, trust me. And you might want to reach out to someone who's familiar with the typical schedules so that you can kind of find, we usually look for the overlap, kind of the shift change time, so that if people wanted to stay a little after work and come, or come in a little early, it wouldn't mess with their parking, because their parking is also only during certain hours at some schools. And so I think just taking the time to sit down with someone who's familiar with these things, what their restrictions are, and keeping those things in mind if you want to include them, because they're not just going to magically, you know, show up or stay 5 hours after work to come to an event. Considering the differences, cultural, generational, practical. At UCLA, we had a staff assembly, and I always hated the name because I was like, just call it what it is. It's the so-called professional staff assembly, because you're doing nothing to include people who don't sit at a desk and use email all day. If they want a scholarship, you created this huge barrier where they have to like log into something and create this application, and it will log them out after 30 seconds if they don't touch something. And a lot of them just have no idea how to do that, or just aren't comfortable, or don't have a computer and they're trying to do it from their phone or whatever. I mean, it's endless, right? The number of barriers. So just kind of think about who these people are, and what would make something accessible to them. How can you remove those barriers? And finally, I would say be ready to respond to skeptics. There are a lot of people that are not going to understand why. Like we have Professor T. Mark Montoya here, and he's like this great Latino representation. Wepa, like why? Who cares about the custodian? Like why uplift the custodian? Like why tell them that's what they should aspire to? And there are people that do have that belief, and this is something that LT talks about in her essay, is how you need both. Like it's not a one or the other type of thing. We don't need to pick which one we want. We can have both. We should have both. But there are people that are going to have that point of view. And so I wanted to share this mural. It's by a Mexican-American artist named Judy Vaca, and she has an exhibit still going on at the Museum of Latin American Art in Long Beach. And I was there pretty recently, and she had a huge sketch of this mural. So it was like step one, it was commissioned by University of Southern California. She sketched it out just in pencil, sent it over to the university president, and he wrote his comments all over it. And one of the original items in this mural that she did take out was an image of a janitor, a custodian with their cart. And the comment written directly by the USC president right on this piece of paper was, why is this an image that we want our students to aspire to? Aren't there better examples? And so I would say just be ready to respond to people like that who can't necessarily conceptualize why you would value something that's outside of this hierarchical structure, right? And to kind of just remind them everything we talked about, these custodians are approachable, they're culturally responsive often. They are the most diverse workforce on many campuses. They provide a sense of belonging, a sense of home. And so not every type of role model that we present has to be the person making the most money on campus, or with the most publications, or with the biggest name. And so kind of being ready to introduce that type of egalitarian mindset to people who may just not understand it yet. So given all of those recommendations, those ideas, we thought that we could give y'all a chance to maybe share out some ideas about how you might incorporate some programming on your campuses, or even just questions you might have about these suggestions.
Let me just chime in real quick, Steph, if people are organizing their thoughts, just some tips. One, with regard to schedules that Stephanie mentioned, we worked at UCLA when I was there really intentionally with the housekeeping managers to learn what the right time was for an event. And we hit our sweet spot was right around 2:30, like Stephanie mentioned. But what we also did was had a drop-in event. So it wasn't something where you had to be there at a start and had to be there at a certain time to end. It was an art-based event where people could design, I forget what it was. It was like for a holiday wreath or something. And so you could come in, you can make your ornament and dip out. But so the workers really appreciated that they had an opportunity to participate, and there wasn't like a certain cutoff time. And students also participated, and I think the wreath was on display, so you could see what the students and the staff did together. And then the other thing, when we did have an event in the evening, it was a first gen welcome. Steph, I can't remember if you were at that one, but what we did was made sure, and so we had a special invitation to the evening staff, but we also had someone greet them at the door. So when they came, they had a special welcome as well. Just again, making sure people feel great in the space, and also just a targeted message for them. Biani's raising her hand. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm all these ideas and really appreciate it. So I'm part of the Classified Senate, and although we do develop a lot of professional trainings, and it is a conversation that we've had in the past, how are we supporting our classified service workers, and really just being intentional with working with their supervisors and finding that sweet spot of something that we are working on developing is brown lunch bag sessions, so like half-an-hour sessions, and it can be once a month, twice a month, and really it's to empower our classified. Everyone has some lived experiences and expertise. So really empowering our classified to just teach a 30-minute informal session. But I actually was chatting with one of my classified senators about this idea of just like, what are we doing to honor our service workers? How can we intentionally cater these brown lunch bag sessions to them? And really, how are we helping them develop effectively And I originally had a classified service worker custodian joke with me when I was going to teach her computer skills, right? So even that, like that really made me think of like how are we supporting them? And then with what y'all mentioned with regards to that student worker alliances, I'm thinking maybe there is a program that we can develop with students to provide them volunteer or community hours to create those alliances. So I just really wanted to thank you all for sharing, and just I'm excited.
Biani, those are such great ideas. And I just want to give a quick suggestion. If you do want to have a brown bag lunch type of event, as someone who has eaten many lunches in the break rooms of UCLA all around with the different little crews, I had like this informal feminist lunch club with all the senior citizen housekeeping ladies where, okay, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, but mostly they trash talk their husbands, but it was still feminist because we were talking about gender roles and stuff. And they brought their, their leftovers. And I would say, like, if you have a way to arrange it, to go visit them where they are, to go to their space, especially because a lot of these workers, in my experience, at least had mobility issues, couldn't just be walking around everywhere. And so either getting some golf carts to like shuttle them to where they need to be, or like I said, like going to them is probably the best way to include them. Those are great ideas.
Yeah, for modeling interactions with campus staff. I just have to share, yeah, I first met LT, Tanya, when she was my boss. I was a second year graduate student. And I worked in the graduate mentoring office with her. And for our luncheons and celebration events, she would always invite the campus custodians to join us. And so we would have like catered lunch, and they would come and we got to talk and hang out. And I was like, wow, it's like that, she really modeled for me how to include workers. And that really, really stuck with me. I think, in fact, it really, when I wrote my dissertation on, empathy for like racialized like laborers, right? Like that was part of like my education, right? Like learning how to incorporate workers. And so even today, like I try to continue to model that, but she modeled that for me. It took someone to do that for me to see what that could look like. And then one more thing I just wanted to share, like at our campus, like recently, or in June, we gave an honorary doctorate to the campus custodian, like the leader of, what's the name, like the supervisor of all the custodians. He got an honorary doctorate. And that was because, at the Black Faculty and Staff Association and the Chicano Latino Faculty and Staff Association saw like the nominees for like honorary doctorates, and they were all like rich white men and donors to the university. And we were like, that's bullshit, right? Like, why are they gonna get an honorary doctorate? Because they gave money to the school. And we know how it works, right? But we wrote a letter of support on behalf of, to nominate the supervisor. And so, we got it. Like the university gave the honorary doctorate to him because we wrote that letter of support. And he's he obviously was instrumental on campus, and he was a Chumash elder. He retired now. He was a Chumash elder that would always get called in to do like the land acknowledgements, like at every event, and the blessings at ceremonies. So he was always used, for events, but he was never giving it recognition. So yeah, that didn't sit well with us. So yeah, that was one thing that we were able to do. Yeah, and not only doctorate. So it's like a PhD that the university kind of bestows upon a person, right? So they didn't actually get a like they didn't go through the coursework or anything to get the degree, but it's kind of like a in name, like a recognition to a person that's contributed to the campus. Yeah, so we were like, he deserves that, not not these rich donors. So
And he gets to call himself doctor, right?
yeah, 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 exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, usually rich donors and folks who have endowed something, or famous people as well, who, you know, the university wants to have that name associated with them. Also, and they tend to do the graduation speech at commencement as well, and sometimes they can be long. And the famous people are usually really good. The just rich donors tend to just go on and on about how great they are and so on. And similar, not a doctorate, but I did put a link about our homecoming dedicatee this last year, or this past couple of weeks ago, who was the head of the groundskeeping at NAU. And this is the first time I could think that it was a service worker and not a faculty, usually a full professor, or and not a student affairs kind of a staff person who has a lot of contact, or assumed contact anyway, with students as well. So I thought that was really neat. And I might be wrong, but I can't remember 21 years of being at NAU where it's been a campus service worker. So I thought that was really cool. If you want to read that particular story, the link's in the chat somewhere.
Something just to follow up on what T-Mark was just saying, something to think about if you do want to give your students opportunities to engage with the campus service staff is that depending on the school, they might actually have like an appreciation luncheon for the staff every year. I know UCLA has one, and I forget who throws it or who funds it, but it was always fun to go because it's just these couple hours where they kind of get to chill, get a catered meal. And I think they play like Safety Jeopardy or something to make it a training event. But if you have that, finding ways that you can join in. And then if you don't, finding if you can host something like that. And it doesn't have to be a catered meal, I hate to say pizza party because pizza parties are getting bad raps these days, but it can be anything that lets them get together and actually show their appreciation in person and form those deeper connections.
Well, if there are no other ideas, Georgina, we can toss this back to you to talk a bit more about our baby that's coming. Oh, wait, Julie has something.
Can I just wondered if anyone has any ideas to share related to involving service workers on family weekends when the parents of our students would be around.
Yes.
Oh my God.
That's a great idea.
Do it.
I know my families would really enjoy that and probably feel more welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, I wrote a proposal. I'm in school now, and I wrote a proposal about this for my kind of like a dissertation draft, like a really initial one. And I talked about how to do that and having families, do things like give tours, or service workers give tours or host the families, or, host them for lunch or something. And my professor's response was, why the service workers? Like, why not bring faculty there? So I think there are definitely like the ways that I just suggested, and obviously not saying that's an exhaustive list by any means. But I think like as a parent, seeing the person that sees your kid every day and that sometimes you could talk to in their language is something that's really powerful. I don't think it needs to be like a really complex integration of those staff, It can just be having them, even with just students, having them introduce themselves at dorm meetings, like having them have lunch with the families. We used to do ESL Cafe at UCLA, and it was just like, hey, we're gonna reserve this room for lunch. Anyone can come through. Students come, just come, help these, workers practice English. Faculty, staff can come. If your parents are visiting, bring your friends through. It was like anyone was welcome. So I think sometimes just reserving the room and, saying, hey, like y'all can eat lunch in here together if you want is enough. But LT, I'm sure you have some ideas too.
No, I was just imagining this, like incorporating this at Menlo. That was it.
I mean, it happens informally anyways, right? Like when our parents come and, they're like us, they feel, shy about being on campus and they feel like they don't belong. They just want to drop you off and go quickly. And it's the workers usually that, show you around and so it's happening informally. So how could we, that's a great idea. Yeah, Julie, about creating programming that's intentional about including service workers in that, like move-in weekend and also like family weekend. Yeah, that's
so great.
I
think the key is being intentional about it and stop letting it happen accidentally.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm all writing notes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I want to incorporate this too. Yeah. So thank you for helping us. That's wonderful.
You know what is so great about that idea, Julie, is that I think, it contributes to the kind of community you want to have on your campus. That's move-in weekends. That sets the tone. And I think a lot of these things, like I said, they're not top down, they're bottom up. And it's not just having one event, but it's like telling everyone, all the parents, all the students, like these are people you need to respect, because I've seen a lot of disrespect. And LT and Georgina will tell you that I can't keep my mouth shut. So usually I intervene in the disrespect and let those students know why it's not okay to throw something on the floor to see if that custodian will pick it up as a game. It's not okay to do all this stuff and set off the sprinklers and this, that, and the other thing. Like it sets a tone right from the beginning of like, these are our community members. They're here. You're going to look at them. You're going to recognize them and you're going to know that their work is valuable. And I feel like it's just such a good idea. Like first day of the year before everybody's even on campus, you're communicating that to all these new community members. Yes, what LT said, these are our elders, show some respect.
Yeah, so all of this, we include a lot of these discussions in our book, which is called Campus Service Workers Supporting First Generation Students. You want to pull up from Routledge? Oh, yeah, Campus Service Workers Supporting First Generation Students. Informal mentorship and culturally relevant support as key to student retention and success. So it's gonna be coming out November 30th, next month, in a month. Yeah, so we're really excited. Yeah, and within the book, we have a lot of contributors whose essays are included. For instance, T. Mark Montoya and Susie Puente and Daisy Alonso, who are here with us today. And so there's a lot of personal testimonies about the importance of informal mentorship from campus service workers, but also like theoretical essays at the beginning of the book, right? Like where I think sociologists and a couple of sociologists have essays about, just discussing the literature and talking about why this matters in the first place. So they really give us a groundwork, a theoretical framework for the importance of workers in mentorship. And then we have personal testimonies. And also the latter essays in the collection examine why it's even more important than ever to think about campus service workers in light of the pandemic, right? Because the workers are in even more precarious situations now. because during the pandemic, as you know, right, like they were the first to be let go of, and they're so important to the basic functioning of our university, and yet they're the first ones that are let go and seen as the most dispensable and disposable. So yeah, so it's a great collection. Hopefully, you know, you can all check it out when it comes out, and we'll be having more discussions to talk about the book in the future. Yeah, do any of our contributors want to share a little bit since you're here?
Susie, can you share just like a couple sentences about what you wrote about? Because you talked earlier about being from a rural farm working community and not feeling like you fit in there, and then going to CLA and finding that working class solidarity. I don't know if you want to add anything about what you wrote about.
I don't remember what I wrote because it's been a while, but it has been a while. Well, yeah, I mentioned my farm working background and how like being part of Project Swell from the very beginning provided me with the community I needed to persist at UCLA. I talked about Dalila and Martin, who became like my mentors. Martin especially like supported me through a really difficult time I was going through at home, and like motivated me to seek out counseling services and other types of support systems at UCLA. So they were like my support system. So that's what I talked about, and how listening to them about like their hopes and dreams for their kids and going to college, it motivated me to pursue higher educational counseling to support students like theirs to reach like, their potential.
And now, ma'am, is that Fresno State background that I see there your graduate school now?
Yeah.
That I might have written your recommendation for, and now you're there? Yes, Susie.
Thank you.
I would love for Daisy to talk a little bit about her chapter. One of the things that the text focuses on, again, is that relationships with service workers extend far beyond an undergraduate experience. So Daisy, could you talk a little bit about your piece?
Yeah, so my chapter is a personal narrative about how I realized, I think we mentioned it earlier as well, that once you graduate from college, you don't lose or you don't shake off the first gen-ness from your identity. First gen follows you forever. And so I wrote about three specific like role models for me as I graduated college and started working as a professional. Then when I went back to law school, and sort of feeling that, in law school, it was Señora Patricia. Señora Pati was a beam of energy in the hallways. And a lot of the time she was the only one who was there late enough to dry my tears. I met her in the law library when she was typing. And so she provided a lot of emotional support. And I think, and then once I graduated from law school and started working at a courthouse, the woman who owned the cafe in the courthouse was very instrumental in helping me maneuver difficult and challenging workplace culture. And so, yeah, I think the takeaway for me, I think most of the time, being professional and being in the legal profession, I think the assumption is that you can do a lot for them. But I think for me, it was the invert. It was the opposite, because they're the ones who were really there for me and allowed me to navigate these spaces in order to truly be successful. And I think the takeaway is that they taught me empathy. They taught me listening skills, just like skills that you don't learn in the classroom, but are instrumental to you being an advocate for someone. So that's a little bit about what I wrote about.
That's all she says. It's amazing. And then, of course, there's T-Mark. As Georgina mentioned, T-Mark is one of those pieces that's at the beginning that talks, and we placed it there intentionally because we wanted people to have a reframing of how we focus on campus service workers. And T. Mark has already talked about his identity of being the son of a custodian. But T. Mark, would you like to add a little bit more?
Sure. So I titled my piece, or at least the I guess the first part of the title, "Custodians of Student Success," and I was using that term broadly, and sort of this idea that I'm not too different from my dad in the sense that, and I think I say this in the piece, that I too clean up a school. I just do it in a very different kind of way, and because I, especially with the in the role I am with in ethnic studies, you know, I've had to deal with a lot of messes. I've had to clean up things. I've been asked to fix things after the fact when some students maybe had made a bad choice in you know, pursuing something that they might have thought was funny or whatever, and ended up being, you know, obviously hurtful for folks, and so on. To sort of, you know, let's talk about racism, let's talk about these particular issues as well. And I really utilize my dad as a custodian to talk about how it instilled in me this understanding of what I do, and I think a much different kind of way. I'm a rare exception as a faculty person where I do straddle student success, but then at the same time also am hopefully very mindful of the role of campus service workers and so on as well, to sort of, you know, bring these pieces together. And it is I actually enjoyed writing the piece as well, because I think hopefully did an okay job of bringing in my story and my narrative, but also, again, the theoretical piece of borderlands pedagogy, which I speak about how we navigate multiple borderlands in our lives, whether they're gendered, sexual, ethnic, class-based, and so on. And again, this was instilled in me by my parents. So I'm almost ready to write the companion piece where I focus on my mom instead of just my dad, because I give him so many shouts out, and I'm like, no, my mom was there too, and you know, she did all these things. So I'm thinking about how to one day do that, and to know that who I am is really a function of who they were and what they, again, instilled in me. And it was a tough piece to write as well. I mean, like I said, you know, my dad, he passed away several years ago. But he made it to 59 years old, and that's too young. So like sometimes too, like I get a little bit or, you know, when I'm like, oh yeah, there are elders, I'm like, oh man, he didn't get to be an elder in the same sort of way as other folks have gotten to as well. And then, you know, I wonder too, you know, what was it in his job that maybe even precipitated his early demise? He died of cancer. So it's like all these other things as well that you start to think about and, you know, be upset about as well. And not, you know, mad at the process, but just mad at just the system, right? It's a systemic institutional sort of issue that I think really hopefully helps us understand that these are human beings and human lives, and people who are really doing the best to also navigate student success. They're just doing it in a very different way. So, you know, that person isn't mowing the grass, they're helping to graduate students. They're not just mopping the floor, they're helping to advance student success and so on.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, your piece is really moving. And then you even include a picture of you and your dad, which was like, I know, I was like, oh, that's, yeah, it had to be up.
So it made it?
Yeah,
It made it.
I made it.
It looks beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. They're not just cutting the grass. Oh gosh, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Who's closing us out? It's not me.
Stephanie, you want to close this up?
Well, I think we just wanted to do some quick acknowledgements before we wrap up and maybe take any final questions. I know all three of us are really indebted to our mentors who were campus service workers. And I honestly have more people than I can name who just showed me like familial kind of love and went out of their way to do special things for me to just help me feel at home on campus. And one of them was going to join us today. Her name is Liz, and she just got promoted to be a housekeeping supervisor, which is really awesome for her. So she can no longer sneak away and hide in a corner and jump on a Zoom call because she's training staff. But she is someone that I think, you know, I wish she could have been here today, but she's someone that's become a true friend of mine. You know, I've met her family, actually brought her with me to CSUN one time to give a lecture. And instead of me giving the lecture, she pretty much gave the lecture with another food service worker that works at UCLA, and just have been able to watch her grow and come into her own. And that was a result of her being given mentorship opportunities, and by being a mentor to a lot of students, seeing her own worth. And so I want to give her a shout out, and of course every other campus service worker that really inspired the work that we put together in this event. And LT and Gina, I don't know if you want to acknowledge anyone.
I'll just go real quick. My part of the book is dedicated to Walter Cepeda, who is a facilities worker at UCLA, who just is like a brother to me and brought me immense joy.
Yeah, and I would dedicate it to the señoras at the dorms that were there for me when I was a freshman. And
That's Mr. Walter, everyone. I'm also lucky enough to know him. He is the coolest.
that's good. But thank you everyone for joining us. Yeah.
Do you have any final questions or comments?
Thank you, Stephanie Estrada.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be having more events probably for the next 6 months. So if you want to continue this conversation, like join us again for another installment of Why Campus Service Workers Rock. Thank you.
We need a shirt made. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.